Vladimir Putin is a figure of Russian fortitude to some, a divisive figure rewriting the politics of the world to others. There is, however, the life of a man who has built up from humble roots to the leadership of one of the most influential leaders in the world beneath the headlines and the television sound bites. Putin was born on the 7th of October 1952 in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg. His early life was fashioned in conflict and adversity. His war veteran factory-working father and full-time mother had survived the brutal World War II siege of Leningrad. They had lost two children before Putin was born. Living in their small collective apartment wasn't easy, but young Vladimir was a tough, scrappy, and always high-energy young boy. As a young man, he was a troublemaker and a fighter, and yet a disciplined one. At around 12 years of age, he began to study the Soviet martial art of Sambo, followed by judo. Not simply interested, he excelled. Eventually, he attained a black belt, the symbol of the commitment that would define so many years of his life. Putin studied law at Leningrad State University in 1970. Secretly, something else lay in the works. The KGB, the Soviet spy agency, had eyes on him. He graduated in 1975 and worked for the organization, ultimately finding himself stationed in Dresden in East Germany. During the Cold War, there, he gathered intelligence and learned the lessons of power, diplomacy, and the impermanence of empires, most of all, perhaps, after the end of the Berlin Wall in 1989. When the Soviet Union fell in Leningrad in the early 90s, Putin quit the KGB and went into politics. He became an advisor to a city mayor, Anatoly Sobchak, who was one of the first Russian leaders to be elected. Putin's initial experience of the political scene: he rose up the ranks in record time. Putin had moved to Moscow by the mid-1990s. Then President Boris Yeltsin became aware of him and had him appointed to important tasks, including chief of the FSB, the KGB's successor organization. Yeltsin saw something in Putin: discretion, efficiency, and most of all, loyalty. Putin became prime minister in August 1999, and a few months later, December 31st, saw the unexpected resignation of Yeltsin, leaving the position of acting president to Putin. Leningrad's quiet man became Russia's leader overnight. When elections were held in 2000, Putin won in a decisive landslide. He was attractive as a man who possessed the skill to stabilize a nation still shaken by the chaotic 1990s. During his initial 2 terms in office, he centralized power, dismantled the oligarchs, and employed the country's alt-riches to stabilize the economy. Most Russians saw better times. Not everyone was pleased about it, however. He was charged with undermining democracy, muzzling the media, and amassing too much power. But when, in 2008, term limits barred him from seeking office yet again, he endorsed Dmitry Medvedev as president and assumed the post of prime minister instead. But nobody doubted who was truly in charge. Putin became president in 2012. Then, during a period of growing protests and political opposition, he held on to power. Throughout the next decade, Putin took Russia down a more aggressive foreign policy path. Russia annexed Ukraine's Crimea in 2014, an act of annexation that drew wide international condemnation and sanctions. It was widely popular in Russia, but it ignited a decade of conflict between Moscow and the West. Then in 2022, Putin took the defining action of his presidency. He invaded Ukraine in full. His so-called special operation became one of the largest conflicts in Europe since World War II. The world responded in shock, with additional sanctions and aid to Ukraine. All the while, Putin has been in the public eye speaking to the Russian people, defending himself, and presenting the figure of a strong, unyielding leader. His fans call him a patriot. His critics see him as a threat to the democratization of the country. No one can contest his control. However, at a personal level, Putin is notoriously introverted. He was married to Lyudmila Shkrebneva, for 30 years before divorcing her. In 2013, they have two daughters. Although they've kept a low public profile, Putin seems to enjoy judo, horse riding, and has gone to great lengths to create the image of physical masculinity and strength. So, what's next in Vladimir Putin's life? That's the million-dollar question. With the war in Ukraine ongoing, and as the Russian president continues to move further away from the West, Putin is at the center of the storm, unyielding, polarizing, and as inscrutable as ever. Love him or despise him, the story of Vladimir Putin just keeps unfolding.